No one imagined the key to the entire trial rested in the hands of a child and the loyalty of her dog. When she gave the signal, something happened that made the judge rise from his seat and left the jury stunned. A long-buried secret, now revealed by the pure bond between a girl and her dog. A little girl, just 7 years old, walked into the courtroom clutching the leash of a Becky. His name was Max. Her name was Lily. She didn't look like someone who belonged in a place like this. She wore a pink sweater, a small backpack with stars, and her steps were slow, uncertain. But Max walked with purpose, as if he knew exactly why they were there. The man seated at the defense table was their neighbor. He had always seemed kind, polite, the sort of person you'd never suspect. But then came the whispers, the strange silences, the look in Lily's eyes. When someone asked her what happened that night, she hadn't spoken a word since. Not to her mother, not to the police, not even to herself in the mirror. The court was silent as Lily took her seat beside her mother. But Max didn't sit. He stood, alert, still. And when the defendant glanced toward them, Max growled, softly, almost like a warning. The judge raised an eyebrow. The jurors looked around, but no one said a word. You see, there was no footage, no witness, no evidence that could prove what really happened. Only one thing was consistent: Lily's silence and Max's reaction. It wasn't just coincidence, because every time the man came close, even just a photograph of him, Max would tense up. He would shift his stance, ears forward, eyes locked, as if something in him remembered, as if he had carried the weight of the moment Lily refused to speak about. Some called it animal instinct, others called it trauma response. But Lily called it trust. She didn't need words. She had Max, and Max was about to show the court what truth looked like, through the eyes of a child's best friend. Max wasn't just a dog. He was trained, patiently, carefully, by therapists who worked with children like Lily. Children who had voices, but couldn't use them. Not because they didn't want to, but because something inside had shut down. After the night everything changed, Lily had stopped speaking. The doctors called it selective mutism, a condition that often follows trauma. She could talk. Physically, there was nothing wrong. But emotionally, she'd built a wall so high no one could climb over it. No one, except Max. He had been assigned to her 6 months before the incident. At first, he simply sat beside her, listened, waited. Then slowly, Lily started to respond, not with word, but with gestures, tiny signals, a tap, a point, a small movement of her fingers. And Max, he understood. When she was afraid, she would touch her left wrist. When she felt safe, she'd pat the top of Max's head twice. When something reminded her of that night, she'd raise 2 fingers, just barely, and Max would freeze. That signal, that simple sign, meant one thing: danger. At home, it was just part of their rhythm. But in court, it became everything. Because Lily couldn't tell the judge what she saw. She couldn't describe what she felt, but she could lift 2 fingers. She could look at Max, and Max, he could do what no one else could. He could speak, in the only way Lily knew how to be heard. Some say dogs can't understand human pain. But maybe those people never met a dog like Max. He didn't just understand her pain. He carried it, word by word, signal by signal, moment by moment. In a world where Lily's voice had vanished, Max became her language. And together, they would tell the truth. One signal at a time. The courtroom was quiet, too quiet. Even the sound of a paper turning felt loud. Lily sat beside her mother, hands folded in her lap, eyes downcast, barely blinking. Across the room, the defendant leaned back. He looked calm, too calm, as if none of this mattered, as if this trial was just routine. Then came the question. "Sir, did you ever approach the girl?" The man didn't flinch. He smiled. "I never even got near her," he said. And that's when it happened. Max stood up, not in fear, not in anger, but with a steady, deliberate motion, his body straight, his gaze fixed, his ears perked forward, his eyes locked on the defendant. Then, a sound, low, rumbling, a growl, deep and soft, but unmistakable. The room froze. The judge paused. The jury leaned in. "Does the dog normally do that?" someone whispered. "No," Lily's mother replied. "Only when she gives the signal." Everyone turned to Lily. She hadn't moved, except she had 2 fingers, lifted gently from her lap, a quiet gesture, but powerful, the signal, the one Max had been trained to recognize, the one that meant, "This is danger." Max didn't hesitate. He growled again, louder this time, his stance firm, his eyes unwavering. It wasn't random. It wasn't instinct. It was trust, because Lily couldn't say it out loud. She couldn't face the man, but Max could. Max would. And suddenly the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted. No one spoke, but the silence now had weight. A truth that had been hiding was no longer hiding. The judge leaned forward. For the first time, the man at the defense table lost his grin. And for the first time, the court didn't just see a dog and a girl. They saw something stronger, a bond that could not lie. The judge called for a brief recess, but no one moved. Not really, because everyone knew something had just shifted. When the session resumed, a new figure stepped into the room. Not a lawyer, not a witness, but a specialist, an expert in trauma response and canine therapy. She had reviewed Max's training records. She had seen the videos. She knew the signs. The courtroom listened as she explained. Lily had developed a signal system, not random, not learned by accident, but intentionally created as part of her therapy. She raised 2 fingers to identify threat, and Max was trained to respond, not with aggression, but with certainty. Her silence, the expert said, is not absence. It's defense. And Max is her voice. The room went quiet again, not from doubt, but from realization. Lily's mother stepped forward, hands shaking, tears forming. She shared something she hadn't told anyone before. A moment, 2 weeks after the incident. She'd found Lily in her room pointing at a photo of the defendant, her fingers raised. 2. Just like today. "She was trying to tell me back then," her voice cracked, "but I didn't know how to listen." The jury didn't need to speak. Their eyes said it all. One member quietly wiped away a tear. Another clenched his jaw, staring at the man who once looked harmless. For the first time, Lily looked up. Not at the judge, not at her mother, but at Max. He was still, solid, watching her, waiting. She reached out and touched his head. Twice. Safe. No words were spoken, but the message was clear. Max had done more than alert the courtroom. He had opened a door to the truth, to healing, to hope. Because sometimes, when a child can't speak, love speaks for them. And today, truth wasn't shouted, it was signaled by a hand, in a heart. That had finally been heard. The trial reopened, not with drama, but with quiet determination. The evidence was still scarce, but now something stronger was in the room. Belief. Max became more than just a dog. He became a symbol of trust, of protection, of truth that refuses to stay buried. Media caught wind of the story. A little girl who couldn't speak, and the dog who spoke for her. It spread like wildfire, not because of outrage, but because people needed to believe that loyalty still mattered, that innocence could still win. The day the verdict was read, Lily sat in the front row, Max at her feet, calm, proud, ready. The jury found the defendant guilty of misconduct and endangerment. But more than that, they restored something Lily had lost: her voice, her safety, her peace. After the trial, a ceremony was held for Max. Not in a grand hall, but at Lily's school. Just a small assembly, a folded certificate, a ribbon, and then a microphone. Lily stepped forward, her first time on a stage. Everyone held their breath. She looked at Max. He looked back. Then, In a voice soft but steady, she said, "Thank you, Max." 2 words, but they were everything. They were healing. They were triumph. The room erupted, not in applause, but in tears, because they weren't just cheering for a dog. They were cheering for hope, for connection, for a bond that broke through silence. Lily never had to tell the full story. She didn't need to, because Max already had. In the end, justice didn't arrive in a sentence. It arrived in a look, a signal, a moment shared between 2 hearts that never needed words to understand one another. And as they walked off the stage, hand in paw, the world didn't just see a survivor and her protector. They saw what truth looks like when it's carried in loyalty and spoken in love.